A narcissist thinks they've won. They've drained the energy, twisted the truth, and fed on the light of the most gentle soul in the room, the empath. But then something happens that terrifies them more than exposure, more than revenge, more than being abandoned. The empath stops playing the game. Carl Jung discovered a psychological transformation so powerful, so irreversible, that every manipulator unconsciously fears it. He realized that when an empath finally reaches the point of exhaustion, when they're fed up with being drained, they don't collapse. They don't become cruel. They become sovereign. They become immune. They become the one force the narcissist can never defeat. The secret Jung discovered. Most people mistake empathy for weakness. But Jung saw it differently. He spent decades studying people who absorb pain, people who feel everything, often more than they should. And he noticed something radical. He noticed that when these empaths reach their breaking point, they don't break. They transmute. Jung called it an alchemical moment. Imagine years of absorbing others' poison, anger, guilt, manipulation, shame. Then, in one single moment of clarity, all that poison transforms into psychological gold. The empath stops being the dumping ground for other people's shadows and becomes the mirror that exposes them. This is why narcissists secretly fear empaths more than any other personality type. Because when an empath awakens, they don't just fight back. They transcend the battlefield entirely. The wounded healer to the sovereign healer. Jung often spoke of the wounded healer archetype, someone who learns wisdom and compassion through their own pain. Empaths embody this archetype perfectly. But here's the turning point Jung uncovered. When the wounded healer integrates their shadow, the anger, the suppressed boundaries, the denied self-protection, they evolve into what I call the sovereign healer. And this is terrifying to narcissists. Why? Because the sovereign healer is compassionate, but not compliant. They can love without being used. They can forgive without being fooled. The narcissist cannot exploit someone who sees through the entire illusion. The principle of enantiodromia. Jung had a term for this transformation, enantiodromia, the idea that everything, when taken to its extreme, turns into its opposite. The endless giver becomes the conscious chooser. The constant absorber becomes the clear reflector. The one who once sacrificed everything now chooses relationships where giving is mutual. The empath does not become less sensitive. They become more precise. Their empathy evolves from a sponge into a scalpel. Science confirms Jung. Fast forward to modern neuroscience, and Jung's intuition finds proof. Dr. Judith Orloff's research shows that empaths have hyperactive mirror neurons, the cells responsible for sensing and mirroring emotions. Their brains literally light up more than others in regions tied to emotional processing. But here's the catch, the same wiring that once made them vulnerable becomes their hidden superpower once they consciously control it. That's why Jung saw empaths not as fragile, but as latent warriors. Warriors of perception. The 3 stages of awakening. Jung mapped out the stages of this metamorphosis. Stage 1, recognition, the lifting of the veil. The empath suddenly sees the pattern. They notice how they've apologized for behavior they didn't cause, carried guilt that wasn't theirs, and called self-abandonment love. This is the moment unconscious dynamics become visible. Stage 2, integration, the shadow awakens. The empath doesn't reject their sensitivity, they reclaim it as a weapon. They use it to see through lies before they're spoken. They stop absorbing everyone's pain and start discerning what is theirs to carry. Jung described such people as psychological seers, those who perceive motives hidden beneath masks. Stage 3, sovereignty, the birth of the individual. This is Jung's concept of individuation, becoming whole, authentic, self-directed. The empath no longer seeks approval or completion from others. They found it within themselves. And from this point on, they cannot be manipulated. The empathic paradox. Here's the paradox Jung uncovered. The more shadow the empath integrates, the more compassionate they become. But their compassion is no longer naive, it is fierce, discerning, and immovable. To narcissists, this kind of compassion is lethal. Because they can't twist it, can't drain it, can't control it. Real-world stories. At work. Sarah, once the scapegoat for a toxic coworker, stops justifying herself. Instantly, the mask slips. Without her emotional labor, the manipulator is exposed for all to see. In family. Michael, guilt-tripped by his mother for years, sets silent boundaries. Her control tactics lose their grip. She either adapts, or she breaks. The empath is awakening, from projection to liberation. In the realm of relationships, the empath often finds themselves in a dynamic where they are a receptacle for another's emotional baggage. This is a concept Carl Jung referred to as psychological projection. For years, they internalize another person's criticisms, believing the accusations are their own faults. They apologize for others' bad behavior, take on responsibility for a partner's unhappiness, and endlessly try to earn love from someone incapable of giving it. However, a profound shift occurs when an empath, like Lisa in the example, realizes that every criticism leveled against them is actually the other person's projected self-hatred. The partner's unhappiness isn't a reflection of the empath's failure, it's a reflection of their own internal void. Once this truth is seen, the empath stops participating in the dysfunctional dance. They no longer defend, explain, or justify their existence. They simply withdraw their energy. The result is immediate and often dramatic. The manipulative relationship, which depended entirely on the empath's unconscious cooperation, collapses. This is the central paradox of the awakened empath. They don't become cruel or vengeful. Their power is not in what they do, but in what they refuse to do. They refuse to carry another's emotional burden, and in doing so, they become conscious. As Jung noted, consciousness is the ultimate antidote to manipulation. The truth detector, a new form of perception. The awakened empath develops what can be called a truth detector, an enhanced form of perception that operates on a deeper psychological level. They don't just hear words, they feel the emotional reality beneath the surface. This is a direct result of their integrated shadow work and newfound sovereignty. This ability manifests in several powerful ways. Sensing manipulation, they can sense a manipulative agenda before it's fully formed. An off-key remark, a subtle shift in body language, or a discordant feeling in their gut serves as an immediate warning. Reading micro-expressions, the empath's heightened sensitivity to others' emotional states allows them to detect lies through the smallest twitch of a face, the dilation of pupils, or a momentary change in tone. Active imagination, Jung would have described this ability as a form of active imagination, where the psyche's deeper realities are made visible. The empath no longer needs to rely on surface appearances. Their perception becomes a tool for seeing the hidden motivations and unconscious dramas that drive human behavior. Once you see this clearly, the charm and deception of a manipulator lose their power. You are no longer easily fooled because your intuition and discernment have become a fortress of psychological immunity. The collective impact, an empathic revolution. Jung's vision extended beyond individual healing. He believed that the awakening of one individual contributes to the evolution of the collective consciousness itself. The awakened empath is a key player in this larger movement. By refusing to be a container for others' unconscious shadows, the empath sets a new precedent. This refusal creates a permission wave, silently giving others the courage to do the same. This is the heart of the empathic revolution. Toxic systems, be they families, workplaces, or entire social structures, are built on the unconscious participation of individuals. They rely on people-pleasing, emotional codependency, and the sacrifice of personal boundaries. When empaths, who are often the pillars of these systems, start to step back and reclaim their energy, the entire structure begins to crumble. The dysfunction becomes visible, and the system is forced to adapt, heal, or collapse. This is why the awakened empath is so feared, not because they are cruel, but because they are a living example that freedom from manipulation is not only possible but necessary for genuine human connection. Are you ready to stop being dangerous to yourself and start being a catalyst for collective change? The final refusal. Carl Jung once observed that what truly defines a person is not simply what they do, but what they refuse to do. This insight becomes revolutionary when applied to empaths, the deeply feeling, intuitive souls who, for much of their lives, have carried the burdens of others as if those burdens were their own. For years, the empath absorbs. They absorb pain, anxiety, shame, and anger that was never theirs to begin with. They walk into a room and feel the unspoken tension in the air like a storm pressing against their chest. They sense the unshed tears behind someone's forced smile, the suppressed rage behind a polite tone. And because they feel it, they often take responsibility for fixing it. But Jung discovered something profound: the most dangerous power of a fed-up empath isn't found in what they do for others, it's in what they finally refuse to do. They refuse to absorb what isn't theirs. They refuse to carry emotions that belong to someone else's unhealed wounds. They refuse to apologize for simply existing, for being too quiet, too intense, too loving, too different. They refuse to dim their light just to make others comfortable in their own shadows. This refusal is nuclear. Because narcissists, manipulators, and emotional parasites do not thrive on their own. They thrive on the empath's cooperation. They thrive on the empath's willingness to feel guilt that isn't theirs, to fix problems they didn't cause, to pour their soul into filling the endless void of another's discontent. But when the empath says, "No more," the narcissist starves. The final refusal is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not an explosion of rage. It is quiet, clear, and immovable. It is the calm severing of the invisible cords that have bound the empath to another's chaos. It is the declaration that, "I am no longer your supply. I am no longer your mirror. I am no longer your scapegoat." This moment is dangerous. Not to the empath, but to every manipulator who once feasted on their light. Because without the empath's compliance, the entire power dynamic collapses. The empath's responsibility. But Jung, ever the wise observer of the human psyche, issued a warning: with great awareness comes great responsibility. When the empath awakens to their power, they face a fork in the road. One path leads to liberation, healing, and authenticity. The other leads to bitterness, vengeance, and manipulation, the very tactics they once suffered under. You see, pain has a way of tempting us to become the very thing that wounded us. A betrayed empath may feel the urge to manipulate in return, to guilt-trip others as they once were guilt-tripped, to cut others down with the same sharpness once turned against them. But Jung knew that this path leads nowhere. It is the cycle of shadow unintegrated, what he called identification with the shadow, where we become possessed by the very darkness we tried to escape. The true responsibility of the awakened empath is not to repeat the cycle, but to transcend it. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating the unconscious, balancing shadow with light and becoming whole. For the empath, individuation means learning to wield their sensitivity consciously, rather than unconsciously. Instead of absorbing everything, they discern. Instead of rescuing compulsively, they choose wisely. Instead of over-explaining themselves, they stand firm in silence. And most of all, instead of letting sensitivity enslave them, they transform it into conscious compassion. Conscious compassion is not blind sacrifice. It does not mean endlessly forgiving abuse or tolerating exploitation. It means loving without enabling, helping without losing oneself, seeing clearly without condemning harshly. It is the discipline of empathy, empathy with boundaries. The awakened empath becomes dangerous not by wielding cruelty, but by wielding clarity. They can look at a manipulator, see the fear and insecurity driving their behavior, and still refuse to participate in the manipulation. They can love humanity deeply without allowing humanity's wounds to destroy them. This balance, this refusal to either collapse into weakness or retaliate with cruelty, is the true mark of mastery. The revolutionary truth. For centuries, sensitivity has been mocked, shamed, and ridiculed as weakness. The empath is told to toughen up, to stop overreacting, to grow a thicker skin. Society often rewards callousness while punishing tenderness. But here is the revolutionary truth: the empath's ultimate weapon isn't aggression, domination, or retaliation. It is authenticity. Authenticity dismantles manipulation because it cannot be controlled. A person who is authentic cannot be guilt-tripped into falsehood, cannot be gaslit into doubting what they know, cannot be seduced by flattery into abandoning themselves. Authenticity shines a light so bright that every mask begins to slip, every pretense begins to crumble. The narcissist, who thrives in illusion, finds themselves exposed in the presence of an authentic empath. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For the empath, authenticity is not just a personal privilege, it is a weapon against deception. When they stop performing, stop pleasing, stop shape-shifting into what others expect, they reveal a truth that terrifies manipulators. They cannot be owned. And when an empath integrates both their tenderness and their power, their light and their shadow, they become unstoppable. This is not the danger of cruelty, it is the danger of clarity. Because the clearest person in the room cannot be controlled. Closing call to power. So if you've ever been told you're too sensitive, let me tell you the truth: your sensitivity is not a curse. It is your radar, your compass, your early warning system, your hidden sword. It is the gift that allows you to see beneath the surface of things, to detect dishonesty before it is spoken, to feel the tremors of hidden motives before they erupt. Yes, it has been used against you. Yes, people have tried to weaponize it, to guilt you, to silence you, to shame you. But here is the turning point: the moment you stop letting others use your gift against you, you become unstoppable. The narcissist feared your awakening all along. They feared the day you would no longer explain yourself, no longer bend to their moods, no longer sacrifice your soul for their comfort. They feared the moment when you would finally see clearly, because once you see, you cannot unsee. And once you refuse, you will never again play small. You were never too much. You were exactly enough. You were never too sensitive. You were exquisitely attuned. You were never weak. You were carrying the weight of others and mistaking it for your own. Now is the time to rise, not by abandoning your empathy, but by becoming sovereign in it. To be sovereign in empathy means to stand in your own power, to feel deeply without drowning, to love fiercely without losing yourself. It means your heart remains open, but your boundaries remain unshakable. And when you rise this way, you do more than heal yourself, you ignite a ripple effect that awakens others. Because every empath who claims their sovereignty becomes a beacon of possibility for the rest of the world. High voltage. If you are ready to stop being dangerous to yourself and start being dangerous to manipulation, say it now, out loud. I am sovereign in my empathy. And know this: the moment those words leave your lips, you have already stepped into a power greater than manipulation, greater than fear, greater than control. The final refusal has begun.